System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Thursday, August 27th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Amoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Amoja, hello, happy Thursday. How are you doing today?
Man, out here maintaining while we can.
That's a fact, maintaining while we can. Let's jump into some geopolitics. Do you want to do that? Is that what your vibe is today? Let's get it. Okay, first thing. This from Clash Report. CIA Director John Ratcliffe flies to Moscow for unannounced visit. Let me say that again. CIA Director. John Ratcliffe made an unannounced trip to Moscow for undisclosed meetings with Russian officials, making the first known visit by a CIA director to Russia since William Burns in 2021. The meeting didn't last that long. Seemed to be very brief. Obviously, the United States and Russia have, especially since the special military operation that's now turning into a war, have kind of had tentative conversations here or there, usually by Jared Kushner or General Kellogg or something like that. But now you have a very official person, CIA director, showing up to have a conversation. What do you think the conversation was about? Do you think we should be alarmed about this? What is your take?
Well, one thing it's definitely not going to be is like some type of trade relations, right? We're not going to be talking about petroleum rights, right? Those things that are being reported, like the CIA director came to talk about an energy truce, whereas the Russians don't go after Ukrainian energy, and in exchange, the Ukrainians, that's a smokescreen. Like, you don't need to send the CIA director for that. You know what I'm saying? It seemed to me like an indicator of something much more serious that's happening, because we're at the crux of several impasses, and something has to resolve. You know what I'm saying? The United States needs to be able to put pressure to end some of these conflicts so that they're able to bring more of their forces to bear. So the fact that someone like that has went there, that hasn't been there since like William Burr. And the thing that Burr was doing was discussing the onset of the Ukrainian war, right? If you look at that date, that's the Russians trying to find out what is the Americans' interest in Ukraine, how far they're willing to go, right? And the Americans gauging the same thing. So for that to be something happening right now, I think it's an indicator of something much bigger. Probably there was a quid pro quo offered. We'll give you Ukraine if you give us Iran. That's a much bigger level thing, right? Like, that's the kind of thing that a spook would have in an unannounced trip. The thing is, the stakes are getting incredibly high. And I think the majesty in all of this, right, when you go to what makes American propaganda so good is the average American has no idea how elevated a position we're in as it relates to Russia, right? We're doing things to Russia now that the United States would have been terrified to do in the 80s, under the Cold War. If you go back and watch the movie The Day After, it was all about NATO had moved troops into Germany, right? Like, we're so much further past that point now, to the point whereas we have American proxies, NATO proxies firing missiles into Russia, like not drones, missiles, whether or not they're interrupted. But these things are only made possible through American targeting, American tech. And what it seems to be is this person made threats. They were rebuffed. Putin is reported to have said it's about to be 3 times worse, right? And what that makes me think of is the fact that, did you notice last week Zelensky awarded, he gave an award to Elon Musk for Starlink's role, right? Starlink, the American satellite system, has been utilized for the Ukrainians to use these militarized drones, right? When we're talking about the wild berries, it's the Starlink satellite system and the courting systems, that go with it, Starlink and Starshield. That are being used in a militarized way that allows them to get very accurate coordinates to anywhere on Earth. You see what I'm saying? And so you're in a place now when the Russians are saying things like, it's going to be 3 times worse, that we begin to believe there's going to be a qualitative change in the way that the war is being fought, right? And so what does that mean? You have to remember that this conflict so far has not been the United States versus Russia. It's been Russia versus a satellite of the United States, right? A proxy. The United States has weapons that it can bring to bear that are very different than what the Ukrainians do. Whether or not you're talking about something that can win a war, you are talking about a qualitative different state of weaponry. And so you're in a position where a war between the United States and Russia might look like satellite war, right? Everyone joked years ago when Trump is like, I'm going to make Space Force. But there is a militarized aspect of space that happens right now. There are satellites that exist to do nothing but kill other satellites. There are satellites in space that do nothing but make other satellites. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, the Americans have a huge satellite advantage over Russia and China, to be fair. Though China is working to bridge the gap, which is why you've seen them put such emphasis on their returnable boosters, first stage boosters. Right now, the Russians and the Chinese, even if you combine their satellite system, is nowhere near as big. And so even if the Russians were to begin to do satellite warfare, the Americans would have a qualitative and a quantitative advantage in that aspect. But it would begin to have it would degrade the Americans' capacity to do war on a global level. Like when you start to fuck with the satellites, right? That's GPS. That's all of the ops everywhere. And this is why, like, war with Russia is a whole different ordeal. This is very different from the type of war that would happen with, like, the United States and Iran, for example. Iran does not have the ability to damage American satellite systems. And what that means is, in many ways, no matter how well Iran is able to resist Americans' military influence, they'll never truly be able to degrade what makes America S-class as far as like their premier suite of weapons and how they're able to project power. The Russians and the Chinese, however, can. So when you see the CIA director going there, it tells me they're aware that the state of hostility could possibly be about to shift from proxy footing to actual. And the Russians have already warned the British. They've kicked their British delegates out, which is the first. That hasn't happened. I mean, in World War II, the Brits had an embassy in Moscow. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't, even in the Cold War with the USSR, there was a British delegate there. So, like, this is a big deal. This is normally one of the last steps you do before war. And it's important to acknowledge that the Russians have once again stated they see England as a co-belligerent. That was the other kind of big story that was out, was this was the Americans warning the Russians not to attack British shipping, British commerce, British interest globally, even though the British are doing exactly that to the Russians. If that's true, that would explain why it was a very short meeting.
No, you're mentioning this already, but U.S. Patriot, and this is from Megatron Ron, U.S. Patriot interceptor stockpiles in Europe are so low that in the event of a Russian ballistic missile attack on military headquarters in Europe, NATO would be in the same position as Ukraine and be forced to take a punch, after punch in the mouth. That's from the Associated Press via Megatron Ron. I've been hearing a lot of conversation about, maybe you have, Russia's watching Iran hit whoever, whatever they want, because the United States can't stop it. And they're thinking to themselves, wait a minute, why aren't we hitting these targets? Why aren't we doing the same things? And I think you've mentioned this to me a couple of times. I don't know how much we've talked about it on the broadcast, but the wondering of kind of like, why is Putin kind of really being conservative with this special military operation, especially with all of the red lines that Ukraine has crossed? You mentioned wild berries. It hasn't been the first time we've struck inside Moscow. Let's not remember that. That was the Biden administration, Anthony Blinken, saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and hit inside of Russia. So, I think that's just, the weapon shortage, we've been talking about it. We don't know how real it is. We don't know how much America has, but America's allies, they certainly don't. And Russia certainly does.
I want to say one thing, right? This is, again, when we talk about the ways that Ukraine is being used, and we'll get into that a little bit later. In this way, Ukraine, again, gets to be the whipping post of Europe, right? Well, we used all of our PAC-3 interceptors. We gave them to Ukraine, right? That way they don't have to look at how many went to Israel and the Middle East and all of those things. But the important thing to talk about is, once again, the effective clause, right? Even if they would have had all those PAC-3s, they would not have been effective. They have not proven their effectiveness against the upper echelon Russian missiles so far. And there's still Russian missile systems that we haven't even seen. But we know for a fact that the PAC-3 has not been successful going up against the Russian Zircon missile system, which is hypersonic. It's had limited success against the Iskander, which is hypersonic. It's had limited success against Caliber, right? Where it has success is against those slow Russian cruise missiles, the Ha-101s, which are kind of more like American Tomahawks. The ones that go into upper orbit and come back down. And this is to say nothing of Burevestnik, which is the Russian nuclear missile that is nuclear powered, that can just be in upper atmosphere for years. This is to say nothing of the Orishnik system, the Little Flower, right? Which is estimated to be Mach 10 and is a hypersonic multiple warhead glide system, right? PAC couldn't have stopped that. If they wanted to hit London right now, there's nothing that could happen. There's nothing that could happen from NATO to stop it, right? Now, NATO will have an inevitable response, and considering their lack of munitions and lack of preparedness, overwhelmingly, it seems like the trend would be a nuclear counter response, and they'd be like, oh, are you going to use tactical small nuclear weapons, with the hope that the Russians wouldn't continue to escalate down the food chain, right? Because this has been a thought process for the West for a while, right? A limited nuclear strike to demonstrate the strength of the West. Once again, as an ability as a deterrent, right? Because the assumption is their opponent will not launch a retaliatory strike. Although almost all of the war games that are demonstrated always show.
That would be very foolish.
Always show you can't. It's like a Pringle. You're not going to eat just one. Once you pop, you can't stop. You fire.
Lay's was you can't eat just one. I get what you was going with. Pop.
There it is. Okay. Boom.
Marketing.
All of these. No.
We're marketing babies. Yeah. Continue.
Right. No one's gonna take that shot. Right. And not punch back, especially when you have the ability to punch back faster. And I think the thing that the Americans will find hard to deal with, all of NATO, in fact, is that NATO will not be able to stop the non-conventional missile response from Russia. And so in many ways, it's like when you're in the fight, it's a fist fight, and then someone pulls a gun. That's the West right now, because they're not going to be able to win this fist fight. Like, the Russians don't really have an interest in putting troops on the ground, right? That's where you begin to lose people. So if you're talking about a limited aerial engagement right now, Europe is not in a great position. Most of their PAC-3 interceptors have went to Israel. They've went to the Gulf nations, right? And they've went to Ukraine. They don't have missile defense. And even if they had missile defense, the missile defense systems that they have are incapable of stopping cutting edge Russian military.
And weaponry, ballistic missiles, what they have, their Richniks, the Budaveshniks, I already talked about, Zircons, really out there. And this goes to show, and this is what we're trying to tell the people in our comments that be talking about Ukraine. you don't know the restraint Russia is showing. No Western nation would show this restraint. What is it we talk about with Robotech and the Zentradi?
Right. It's almost as if they don't understand we're holding back the entirety of our military force.
Yeah. I mean, no other country, like I said, no country in the West would have this type of restraint. And people think that, Putin is just this evil guy and he can't wait to kill Ukrainians and all this other stuff. When the fact of the matter is, they gave significant warning and they allowed civilians to leave as early as possible. And they've killed so many less civilians than Western nations have in comparison.
I think it's important just to say quickly, getting hung up on whether or not a politician is evil is a waste of time, right? Are they evil? Are they good? That's irrelevant. What's relevant is what do they do and why do they do it, right? It's easy to understand what Putin does and why he does it because it's evidenced over his 30 years, right? He's saying, I'm going to preserve Pax Russia, this greater Russia sphere, and this is why he has protection towards countries that have great histories with Russia, countries like Armenia, countries like Belarus, you know what I'm saying? Kyrgyzstan, all of those countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union. You know what I'm saying? And they had this type of relationship with Ukraine until the Maidan coup that was arranged by the Americans. Once again, Victoria Nuland and those guys under Obama.
Let's talk a little bit more about this. This is from our good friend, Commie Central. More war propaganda aimed at paving the way for the conscription of Ukrainian women. Commie Central violently kidnapping Ukrainian women out of their homes to send them off to die in a war the West never had a chance of winning is now feminist. And apparently, we've been talking about this. The grand scheme of fascist white feminism, the Miss Marvel, Captain Marvelification, of women in the military is being, exhibited or, trial run here in Ukraine. It doesn't seem like the type of thing you do when you're winning a war. It doesn't seem like the type of thing you do at all. And of course, we've seen the United States. I know 3 women were killed at least, or 3 prominent women during the the current Iranian conflict. But the conscription thing, I think, is a different conversation in general. And we've already seen footage and videotapes. I'm sorry, not videotapes. I'm old school. But footage of women in these, battle areas, raising their hands, and it's been sort of an ongoing process. But now the conscription may be here. What are your thoughts on this? What do you know about this?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, right? We talked about on Inner City Left about a month ago how there was a Ukrainian woman whose unit was taken prisoner, right? And she puts up her hands and she says, "Don't shoot, I'm pregnant." You know what I'm saying? So if they have pregnant Ukrainian women on the line, what does that tell you about their chances for winning this war? That's putting not just the present, but the present and the future literally on the line, right? And this is why the Russians continue to say, like, are they trying to fight down to the last Ukrainian? Like, when you hear these numbers that they continue to regurgitate about how many troops that the Russians are losing, it's truly ridiculous because there are no videos, okay, of the Russians being run through the streets, running away from the conscription officers. Russia is actually turning away people because they're actually getting more people signing up for their military service than they currently need, and so, that's, again, one of the conversations that they allege when the CIA director came is, he was telling the Russians, don't mobilize, Like the Russians are literally going to take advice from the Americans as to how large their military force should or should not be, or receive a threat about what will happen if they do, right? But the bottom line is you see Ukrainians being dragged off the street every day, and that has not staunched the flow of blood, right? And they need bodies. General Keith Kellogg was just in Ukraine, and apparently the conversation was, there's no more money until we see some bodies. And if that means you need to get the women out there, get the women out there. And the fact that they're trying to build this as girl power is very dangerous. I also want to point out, right? You saw on that, can you bring back that image? It was up. It was on Stars and Stripes. Notice that is a Nazi emblem on that little pink girl power little mobile launch rocket system over there, right over there by her left shoulder. That is a Nazi symbol, right? So you're seeing these things. This is just again, right? It's just a moment of naked propaganda that everyone should be able to see through, and yet once again, here we are being sold why Americans have to support literal Nazis in the field. And in fact, that it's not a bad thing. It's a girl power thing. It's an empowerment activity. And please understand, whatever they try out there will make its way home to America. This is why we try to tell everyone what happens in Palestine matters. When all of that surveillance state in Palestine, in Gaza, made it here, now everyone's like, oh my God, how can we live with all of these flock cameras, right? If they're testing a draft for their American proxies, please understand that data will come back home and those results will be applied.
Sorry, I was muted there. Just wanted to talk about this real quick. We weren't planning on talking about this, but I wanted just to mention it because last episode we talked about economic D-Day and blah, 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 all this other junk. Okay, but this is a food crisis. And we know that Ukraine is supposedly the breadbasket of Europe. So here comes the food crisis. Time for another massive jump in food prices from levels that are already far too high. Farmers in America's Corn Belt say they are facing the worst crisis in 40 years as an explosion in diesel and fertilizer costs triggered by Donald Trump's Iran's war pushes grain producers to the brink. From Philip Pillington. I wanted to know because, you know, the economic D-Day conversation, we just had that fertilizer, a big thing now with the Strait of Hormuz, being blocked for America. These prices are about to go through the roof. And this money that's been funneling in to Ukraine for so long, at some point is going to be drying up. And it just kind of goes to show the United States, when they're losing their stockpiles and weaponry, prices of oil is going up, prices of fertilizer is going up. And these are all consequences from the decisions to fight Russia and to fight Iran and also support Israel. And we're facing these huge food prices. And here's the good news, Tanky, and I'm just want to get your thoughts on this. This is the cheapest food's ever going to be. Congratulations. Thoughts?
Yeah, you're going to reach a point where food is not only just high, but unavailable. And you're starting to see that with all of the recalls, right? Again, all the way back in February on Inner City Left, we told you this petroleum disruption is deeper than it looks because petroleum byproducts run the world. All of agriculture runs off petroleum. It runs off diesel. It runs off distillates, right? Sulfur, all of this chemistry that is happening in the world is run on petroleum. And if you take 25 to 30% of the world's supply and to take it away immediately, you can only hide these disruptions for so long. And now they're becoming incredibly abundant, right? Because some of these things were incredibly time sensitive, where it doesn't matter. If it comes out now, it's too late. Right? There is a time in medication where the medication has come too late. Oh my God, it's stage 4 cancer. Wow, let's get some blood tests. my guy, it's too late. You know what I'm saying? When all of the planning is happening in the northern hemisphere, that's happening during spring. We're now at the end of summer. So if the farmers are just now getting sulfur, all of the crops that relied on those petroleum distillates are going to be impacted. And what you're seeing is food shortages. And then it's going to be worse. I mean, that's because this has not been resolved, right? This conflict the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. This goes back to the urgency, right, of why Langley has to go to Russia, because it's like, look, yeah, we know we were being cute and we were hitting, all of your military ports in the Black Sea. We didn't really expect you would do the same thing and close Odessa, because understand, the two biggest wheat producers in Europe is Russia and Ukraine. So like if Ukraine can't ship that wheat out to Russia, out through the Black Sea, out through the Dardanelles to get that back to Europe, Europeans don't have bread. Europeans don't have pasta, right? All of that, all of those things they think about the third world, those will begin to manifest in Europe. Now, again, there'll be an effect in America too, but once again, we're far more food independent than Europe is. We grow far more of our food than the Europeans. So we'll have high prices, but the Europeans will have shortages. But shortages will come. The longer this plays out, the longer shortages become inevitable.
Yeah, all well said. And again, cascading failures. They are beginning now and they're going to continue. The environmental crisis that we've been, laughing and joking about, beginning of episodes, that is here. That's going to continue to make, crops and livestock and the things that we need to survive more difficult. And when we're fighting these unnecessary, unprovoked wars of choice, and we're ruining our ability to eat healthy food and, eat. I mean, we're talking about this Argentinian beef that's now being recalled, all these other things. I mean, you would think that this is the thing that they're not going to skimp on, but deregulation has brought us here.
I just want to follow up on that too, right? Because this is another opportunity, right, for you to reconnect yourself with your local markets, because who's going to be impacted? The big super grocery store that you go to. Who's probably going to be far less impacted? Your local butcher. Your local butcher probably has relationships with local people that are growing livestock. And that food will be safer. It will be more expensive, but it will be safer. And these are the real ways, right, where your community matters, right? We're building internally and making sure that you have infrastructure that lasts on a localized level that can scale up is useful. And in abundance, yeah, whatever. Go to the grocery store, get the ground beef. But in moments like this, where deregulation is unlikely to change, you probably need a relationship with the people that you get meat from if you're the kind of person that wants to eat meat.
Yeah, same thing for your crops. I mean, you have a much better chance if you're going to a farmer's market. But, again, that's expensive. And in a world that's getting more and more expensive, people don't, necessarily have the extra expense to go buy local or whatever that may be. It's really been made inaccessible to people that aren't rich, or at least middle class, if there's such a thing. But yeah, I mean, that's just where we are. Thank you, RFK Jr. You the man. You did it, bro. Appreciate you so much. I got like a little clown world type thing, like a little, I don't know. I want to show it to you because, Josh Kushner, the brother of Jared Kushner, son-in-law of Donald Trump, bought the Los Angeles Lakers with Bob Iger, who is a former CEO of what you call Disney, the mouse, if you will say. Okay, now look. This was funny.
No.
Okay.
No. Let's get it.
Okay, I just want to. So, Jared Kushner, right? That person just bought the Los Angeles Lakers, right? It's his brother, okay? So Hakeem Jeffries, like literally a week later, meets with Jared Kushner. People find out about this, and people are asking themselves, why would Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic minority leader, be meeting with the son-in-law of Donald Trump? And this was his like pitiful response.
What's up, y'all? Just finished up an event here in the community in Brooklyn. I want to give you a real talk on this Jared Kushner situation. He asked for a meeting, and I took it.
Just a little. It's just like milk toast. Like, oh my God, I can't even breathe. Yeah, I mean, it's the Democrats for you.
And again, what they're demonstrating, right? These are the things that they do that are going to purposely depress, right, voter turnout in November. And they're going to be like, oh my God, why didn't we do as good as we thought we were? Because you're demonstrating right now to the person that wants so much to believe there's going to be a change, right? That it's not going to be the old party as usual with Jared Kushner and presidents, friends, and family enriching themselves through government largesse and connections. And you have this person who could quite possibly become the Speaker of the House, which is one of the most important ceremonial positions in the United States of America, a person that is on the top 5 list of people that is in the ascendancy in the event of a catastrophic failure, right? I think Secretary of State is what, 4th, Speaker of the House is 3rd, right? I think it's President, Vice President, Speaker of the House, right? I think that is the ascendancy order, right? So that is just one of the most important positions you can have. And this person is demonstrating already. No matter what you think on the local level, when you see these Mamdani dudes, you know, or Saeed who's running, this is the dude that's going to be running the show. And those people have already signaled compliance. Mamdani's not even in Congress. There was no reason for him to have an opinion about it at all. And he's already said, I support the party leader, right? So they're telling you right now, there's not going to be any change. There's not going to be anything that you hope for. There's probably not going to be any type of a real attempt to bring the president into order. They're certainly not going to try to remove the president. And it's just going to be, again, business as usual. This is not a person that is exciting. It's a person that is not genuine. He has no real ties to the Black community or any working class connection. This is a person that has got along, that's went along to get along his entire career and will not be one step out of sync with anything you would have gotten from any of the people before. Do not expect him to be different in any kind of a meaningful way from Nancy Pelosi or any of the other speakers, Mike Johnson. He will not be different. That's how he has attained this level of power, and he's virtue signaling to the people that matter. Let them think whatever, but the reality is, I'm with you.
He asked for a meeting, and I said, okay. I mean, that's your explanation.
What you want to talk about?
Crazy.
I don't think that, again, how many people from his congressional district have been able to have a meeting with him, but the president's son-in-law, like, this person isn't even in your district. This person is not a elected representative. He has no official function for the United States of America, right? It just symbols, once again, fidelity to the Trumps and, more importantly, fidelity to the agenda that's going to continue to be maintained from the Americans and the Israelis.
Yeah, facts. Well said. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners, guys. We have been reinstated onto Spotify after much work and tribulation. We've made it through. We have returned to Spotify. You can, of course, hit us up on Inner City Left on Instagram, innercityleft.com. Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins, Amoja's book of poetry, will be available in the description. Let's see what up. Patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. You guys are the real heroes. I love you like cooked food. We have a budding community in there. I think we're getting close to like 200 members. We have free memberships for
please.
Sorry about that. And I just wanted to mention this. Next week, we're going to have journalist, a Congress hopeful, a legend in the game, Sam Husseini, on the show. This gentleman right here.
Profitable scam.
Stepped right
of
up.
his, please sit down. Please sit down.
Back genocide. What can be more corrupt than backing genocide? This is part of the same time with you and Trump playing off of each other. Oh, he's worse. Oh, he's worse. You were put on notice in November of 2023 by the Center for Constitutional Rights and other legal and human rights organizations. Notice on potential legal liability for aiding, abetting, inciting, or conspiring to commit genocide.
Hold up on it, man.
Congressional acts.
He was also removed by asking Anthony Blinken some questions as well. Was forcibly removed. Journalist that was covering October 7th and the G-side on Palestine. He was one of those. You may know him from being in those press rooms asking the most important questions. He's going to be running for Prince George's County Congress, and he's going to be on our show next week. So I'm very excited. Tanky, your thoughts? Any thoughts on it?
Man, good times, man. I mean, that's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it. You have to, if you're in those positions, right? People are like, oh, change the system from the inside. But then nobody has nothing to say. You know what I'm saying? Buddy was on the inside. He lost his access by using it to ask the hard questions, right? To be, to Democrats and to Republicans, not to get caught up in the bullshit partisan nature of, well, I'm not going to go for my guys, right?
Yeah,
it's an ideologue.
And easily could have stepped into that DSA role, decided to go Green Party. We're a big fan of the Green Party. So that's who we want to promote. People who are not interested in walking the tightrope of Zionism and support for Palestine. We need people to make real decisions. And I believe that Sam Husseini is one of those people. So we'll talk more about that next week when we have him on the show. Tanky, anything we missed? Any final thoughts that you have before we get out of here?
Man, I just be watching them out there wild, and I just wonder in my head, fuck is they talking about?
Oh, man, that is also just another good... you keep me honest, man, with my stuff. We are here. We just released a new song. Well, come on, let's get with the program here. I'm getting very like when it comes to StreamYard. They always got me working out here. How we go? There we go. What is they talking about out right now for purchase, for streaming? Amin TMK, anywhere you find music. Lil Tanky, anywhere you find music. I think that's enough promo for today. For Amoja, Lil Tanky, Sumler, I'm Amin TMK. Oh, Amoja, did you want to say something?
Nah, that's it.
Oh, for Amoja, Lil Tanky, Sumler, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Interstate Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.